Morning, Kal Kadosh. We're going to be continuing Chanukah Sameach. We're continuing on Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph 21a1. However, though, we're just going to start on the bottom of 20b, which is Kaf Amud Bet, just the last lines where it says the Ika Damri, just that way we should understand what's going on. We said Ika Damri. Some people say that in a case where you had a Bechadash, which means wine which is new, which usually when you talk about new wine, you don't use it for ziluf. Remember, ziluf was that just like in construction nowadays, they come and they pour water on the ground in order that the dirt does not come up, right? The earth and the dust does not come up. So too in the olden days, they used to do ziluf, the dirt floors. Everyone had dirt floors, and therefore they used to put this, how do you call it, wine on the floor in order that it would have a very, very good smell, okay? So says the Gemara, if it's going to be new wine, and therefore you can't use it for ziluf, tishafeh chaval, which means you're going to throw the entire barrel out. But if you're going to leave the barrel, it could be that this barrel, since there's a problem with it, you could come to a takala, you could come to a problem. So therefore, what do you do throughout the entire barrel? Biyashan, if it's going to be an old barrel, says ziluf, therefore if it became tameh, you can't consume it, but you could use it for ziluf. So therefore, just use it for ziluf because it's an old barrel of wine. So Amrulo, they went and they told Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yosef. Now we're starting. Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. En achrah shlishim nachrah. When we come and we say that there's going to be a third shita is machriya. Machriya means that I have two sides of the spectrum. I have the left and I have the right. Now the middle grounds, they saw both spectrums and they want to make like a type of a compromise. So they say, you know what, I'm going to be machriya. This is halacha. However, though, if you're going to come and you're going to give your third opinion, that's not called achra. Achra means that I'm taking both opinions. I'm like, this is a completely different opinion. So therefore, this shita is not an achra between both of them, but it's a new svara that the first one's never mentioned. So therefore, you cannot be machriya. So to here, when you are going to make a differentiation between a takala gedola and a chashash katan, and according to Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, they're not going to be choshesh bichlal for takala, right? But they never mentioned the concept of a takala, so therefore it's a different halacha. Okay, remember the concept of takala means is that maybe somebody's going to come and start eating it or starting partaking from it if it's going to be tameh and you have a problem. Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, machloket shenafla lepachot mimea seah chulin tameim. The machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua is only going to be when we're talking about a case where you have the teruma that fell in less than 100 seah of chulin tmein. Why? Because you don't have the chulin shebegat tachtona. You don't have 100 times opposite the truma, right? Why? Because then it's not going to be batel the tar of it, and then it's going to be kama semrubeh. Aval nafla lemea chulin tmein. But if it did fall into 100 chulin tmein, ledivrei akol terev etitameh. According to everybody, you just let it fall, and it's going to contaminate everything. And do not contaminate it, which means like this. Usually, how much do you need to annul something? How much do you need? 60 times. What does that mean? Some milk comes into your cholent. Yeah, now you're going to say, what a good taste. No. If you say what a good taste, it's a problem now. Yeah, what do you need? You need 60 times in order to annul. By teruma, it's not 60 times. It's 100 times, which means that over here you had on the top part of the wine cellar, under the top of the wine press, you had terumat me'ah. Why? Because it was tameh. The wine is coming down. Now, not tmeah. It was just regular truma. Sorry. On the bottom of the wine press, you had chulin tmeim. So the chulin is tameh, and the top is truma tahor. So says the Gemara, if you remember, we were mentioning, can I come now and take an impure utensil and save the wine? Now we asked, why would you take? You only have an impure utensil. Now, why are you going to do it? It's very simple. If you take an impure utensil and save the wine, anyway, the wine was going to become tameh. Whether it fell into the chulin tmeim on the bottom or it comes into this pot, which is tameh. The only reason why you want to do it is because you want to save the chulin. Because chulin tmeim, you're allowed to eat. I'm allowed to eat chulin tmeim. Trumat tmeah, you have to burn. So there's a big difference. So trumat tmeah, you have to burn. Chulin tameh, you're allowed to eat. The second that the truma falls into the chulin and now you don't have 100, it becomes tameh, and then that's it. You can't eat anything of it. So it's hefsem merubeh. So says the Gemara, obviously the bottom has to be talking about that you don't have 100. Because if you did have 100, it's going to be annulled, and therefore just let it fall. It's going to become tameh, yeah, but it's batel. And therefore, once it's going to become tameh anyway, so you just leave it fall, and then when it falls, it's going to become batel, and then you're allowed to have the chulin tmeim, no problem. Okay? Tani Minachi, you also learned in a Braita, Chavit shenishbira begat alyona, when you have a barrel that broke on the top wine press, v'tachtea and underneath you have 100 chulin tmeim. Well, there Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer agrees to Rabbi Yeshua. Shimatei yechol latzim mimenu revi b'tara. If you could save a revi b'tara, save, and if not, right, tered v'titameh v'al tameh biyad. Just let it fall down on its own, and you're just not going to pay attention to it. You're not going to make it tameh with your own hands. So says the Gemara, Hai modeh Rabbi Eliezer le Rabbi Yeshua. He says what? This is talking about now that Rabbi Eliezer is going to be modeh to Rabbi Yeshua. Remember, we're on Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph, we're just finishing the perek now. So it says, are we saying that modeh Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua? Modeh Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Eliezer Mbale. It shouldn't have said that Rabbi Eliezer is agreeing to Rabbi Yeshua. It should have said that Rabbi Yeshua is agreeing to Rabbi Eliezer. That's what it should have said, right? Why? Because when you have enough chulin to mim valtel the truma, there's no machlok because there's no ifsed. So the chidush is to do the seifa, which means that if you cannot save it, what are you supposed to do? Yeah. So therefore, the Braita should have said that Rabbi Yeshua is modeh to Rabbi Eliezer. But since in this case you cannot save a revi b'tara, Rabbi Yeshua permits to be mitameh the truma biyadayim in order to save hefsem rubeh. And if there's not hefsem rubeh, then he says it's going to be asur. So therefore, why did it say in the Braita that Rabbi Eliezer is the one that agrees to Rabbi Yeshua? The opposite. You have to say Rabbi Yeshua is the one that agrees to Rabbi Eliezer, that you are allowed to save it, right? So he says, Amar Rava, Rava says, you're right, epuch. You have to switch it. You have to say, modeh Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, sorry, to Rabbi Eliezer, not Rabbi Eliezer to Rabbi Yeshua. Another answer. Rav Huna ben Rabbi Yeshua, Rav Huna ben Yeshua says, Leolam lo tepuch. Really, Be'emet, you're not supposed to switch it around. Hacha ma'eskina, what are we dealing with? We're talking about a utensil, which basically you wanted to save it with a utensil that the inside was pure and the outside is impure. For example, let's say you got tameh from outside, right, with mashkin, with liquids. Okay, so you got tameh with liquids on the outside. So what happens? So he says in such a case, when it gets tameh with liquids on the outside, right, it's only going to be tameh akli, only with rabbanan. So the rabbis instituted that if you touch it on the outside, so then it's going to be tameh only on the outside and not on the inside. So now, that which the writer says, Rabbi Eliezer is modeh to Rabbi Yeshua, is not talking about the case of the seifa. It's a case of the reisha, which means that you could save a revi'it of chulin betahara, right? What did it say here? Chulin, revi'it of, it should be a revi'it of truma betahara. What do you have there in the article? Or whatever, you in French. For John Paul, you have it in English, no? The art scroll.
You're on the six pasuk.
I'm basically where it says that Rav Huna ben Yeshua
Ravuna, yes, that's it.
And what are we dealing with?
Ravuna,
The utensil that became tahor, all right, on the inside, and the outside is tameh. Continue reading the art scroll in English.
Yes, in a vessel whose interior is ritually pure and whose exterior is impure by rabbinic law, having become impure through contact with impure liquids, lest you say that we should issue a decree that one may not rescue even a quarter log, lest the vessel's exterior touch the teruma and render it impure. The Braita teaches us that Rabbi Eliezer conceded that Rabbi Yeshua, that despite that concern, it is permitted to rescue a quarter log of pure teruma.
Teruma. I have here chulin. What do you have there?
I have teruma.
Look at this. Look at this word. Come, incredible.
Yes, I'm still in Sefer.
So it says over here, so Mao the Tema, I would have thought to say, so it was a mistake here. It had to be a revi'it of truma betahara. There's a mistake here in the art scroll. Okay, Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. So it says here, Mao the Tema, I would have thought to say, din managab gabo betruma, that maybe the outer part of the kli is going to touch the truma, which is going to be metameh biyadayim. Kamash Malan comes to teach you the Braita that we're not going to suspect, according to Rabbi Eliezer, and he's modeh, that you're allowed to save it, which means, remember, the inside is pure, the outside is impure. So I would have suspected that maybe if I'm going to start saving, right, truma, maybe the outside part will also touch the truma, and I was metameh biyadayim. Kamash Malan, since the inside is pure, I only suspect that it's going to go on the inside and it's not going to become impure from the outside. Hadran alach or larba'asar. We finished the first chapter of Masechet Pesachim, second chapter.
Adran alach.
Yeah, Adran alach. Yeah, Orul Abasad. Says the next Mishnah. Okay, we're going ahead. This is, remember, tomorrow's daf. Kol sha'a shemutar le'echol ma'achil lebehema. Any time that you are allowed to eat chametz, you're allowed to give it to your animal. The domesticated animal. Lechaya, to a wild animal. Ulofot, and to birds. Right? Or to chickens. Umochel nochri, you're allowed to sell it to a goy. Umutar banato, you're allowed to benefit from it. Avar zmano, once it passes the time of eating chametz, asur banato, you're not allowed to benefit from the chametz. So you're not allowed to even to put it, to use it as fuel for your oven, right, or your stoves. Rabbi Yehuda says, yeah, the only way to burn chametz is burning it. Meaning, how do you get rid of chametz? Biur chametz, srefa, you have to burn it. Chachamim say no. You could even crumple it up and just throw it to the wind, and it goes in the wind. Or matila yamar, you could throw it in the sea. There's no problem, whichever one that you want. Okay? Says the Gemara. Kol shah shemutar le'echol ma'achil. Anytime that you're allowed to eat the chametz, you're allowed to give over the chametz. Hakol shah she'enu mutar le'echol. So says the Gemara, make a diuk from the Reisha. The Reisha said as long as you could eat it, you could give it to eat. So mashma, you could deduce from there that if you do not eat it, you cannot eat. Correct? Yeah? So says the Gemara, yeah, kol sha'ah she'enu mutar le'echol ma'achil. So says the Gemara, I'm going to say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Right? Why? Because he said that from once it's going to be asur le'echol chametz, you're not allowed to benefit from it. So it can't be like Rabbi Yehuda, but rather like Rabbi Meir. The Rabbi Yehuda, but if you're going to tell me it's Rabbi Yehuda, hayika chamesh tenochel o denochel u'ma'achil. He says you have the fifth hour that you're not going to eat it, and you're not going to also give it to your animal. Ditnan, you remember this machloket? We already learned this machloket in the first chapter. Ditnan was we learned in the Mishnah Bav 11b. Yudalef Amubet. Rabbi Meir says, Ochlin kol chamesh v'sofrim t'chad shesh. According to Shtat Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to eat the fourth hour and the fifth hour, then you stop and you burn at the beginning of the sixth hour. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you're allowed to eat the entire fourth hour. Tolin kol chamesh, the fifth hour, it's hanging. You're not allowed to eat it, but you don't have to burn it. V'sofrim to b'tchilat shesh, and you burn it at the beginning of the sixth. So according to everybody, you burn it at the beginning of the sixth hour. The only question is, until when are you allowed to eat it? According to Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to eat until last moment. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to stop 1 hour earlier. Okay? So obviously, our Mishnah then has to be going according to Rabbi Meir and not according to Rabbi Yehuda. Because if it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have 1 hour that you're not allowed to eat it, which is the fifth hour. So it says, Velamai, but rather what? Rabbi Meir, it has to be Rabbi Meir. So so once again, when it says every single hour that you're allowed to eat it, you're allowed to give it to other people to eat, which means to your animals to eat. It has to be any hour that you're eating it before. When I use the language kol mutar, mutar is mashma that any hour that technically it's permitted to eat it, you're allowed to give it to your animal. But not that you're actually eating it. If you were actually eating it, it should have said kol she'ochel. Any hour that you're eating it, you're allowed to give it to other people to eat or to animals to eat. So Amar Rabba Bar Ula, so says Rabba Bar Ula, Matniti Rabba Gamliel he. Our Mishnah is like Shitat Rabba Gamliel. Tetram, as we learned in the Mishnah, Rabba Gamliel says, Chulin chalin kol arba. Chulin is eaten all the fourth hour. Truma kol chamesh. Truma could be eaten through the Kohanim all the fifth hour as well. V'sorfim mitchilat shesh, and everybody's going to burn at the beginning of the sixth hour. So this is what it means to say. Kol shah shemutar le'echol kohen b'truma. Anytime that the kohen is allowed to eat truma, Yisrael ma'achil chulin lebehema chayav ve'ofot. The Jew is allowed to give over to eat chulin to the behema chayav ve'ofot, even though he himself cannot eat it. But he is going to be eating the truma. So they made a special leniency to do with truma. Why? Because basically here the Rashi says is because Chachamim did not want to lose truma biyadayim when behemet it's still permitted. Which means, remember, truma, you're not allowed to burn truma for no reason. So here, technically, they're allowed to eat it. So the rabbis did not want to come and start making decrees or start doing things because at the end of the day, chaval, they were able to benefit from it 100%. And it was incorrect not to do that. You understand? Like, why? Why are you just, I'm going to burn truma? Give them another hour. Right now, mina Torah, it's permitted. So let them eat. So truma, they were more lenient than chul. So says the Gemara, why did I have to teach both? Behema and also chaya. Just teach me one, right? And I already know both. So it says the Gemara tzricha. Right? Again, remember, behema is domesticated animals and chaya is wild animal. Why do I need to teach both? Just teach one. Says the Gemara, tzricha, I need both of them. Ditana behema, but if I only taught behema, di mesharia chazile. It says, but if you are going to leave the chametz, you're going to come and you're going to see it. You're going to be batel, and it's not the derech to hide it. Okay, so by the animal, I would say that only by an animal it's mutar to give chametz on Erev Pesach, because if he's going to leave it over, you see it. But a wild animal, which is whether it's going to be like a weasel, right, or you called it a marten last time, I think it was, or a cat, or all these things, that if you leave it over, usually in itself, that animal hides the chametz. Aim Allah, I would say you're not allowed to give it to eat, because then it would hide it, and you don't know where it is, and all of a sudden you have chametz on Pesach. So that's why you needed to teach also the chaya. That means it was an extra permission by the chaya that you would have thought to say that you cannot give to the chaya. Kamashmalan, you're allowed to give to the chaya. Now, what about the opposite? Just teach chaya and don't teach behema. Teach the wild animal, right? And don't teach the domesticated animal. Vitana chaya, why? Mishum di mesharia miatz mitznah. It's only because I would have thought to say that it's only going to be permitted because it's going to come and it's going to hide it. But behema, sometimes it just leaves it over and you don't pay attention to it. Then you're going to transgress avera. You're not allowed to see it, you're not allowed to have it. So that's why it says over here, Lord, I would have thought that you're not allowed to do that. That's what you needed. Fine. Ofot lamali. Yeah, why is it that you need ofot? Why do we need, we just explained why you need behema and why you need chaya. Why you need chaya, why you need behema, why do you need ofot? Birds that you're allowed to give to eat the birds. So it says the Gemara, I did tana behema v'chaya, tana behema ofot. Once you went and you taught me behema and chaya, you taught ofot, but it all comes together usually. Meaning once you're already bringing them down, it's all together in one thing. Then we said you're allowed to sell it to the goy. Mochrol nochri. So says the Gemara, pshita, obviously you're allowed to sell it to a goy. So says the Gemara, lapuke ma'itana, this comes to exclude this braita, this tana the braita. The time we learned the braita, Bet Shammai omrim Bet Shammai said, lo yimkor adam chametzol lenochri, and ken yodea bo sheichle kodam Pesach. Shita Bet Shammai is you could only sell your chametz to a goy if you know that he's going to get rid of the chametz before Pesach. Okay, that means that's the only time that you're allowed to. That means according to him, it's asur to a Jew to come and to sell the goy to the the chametz if it's going to have it right for Pesach. So that's shitat Bet Shammai. Obviously, we don't pass on that, but that's a shitat Bet Shammai, and that's why because of that, that's why we said it's to exclude this shita, and that's why you're allowed to sell it to a goy. Okay, Bet Hillel omrim kol shah shemutar lechol mutar limkor, and that's how we're going. Like anytime that you're allowed to eat it, you're allowed to sell it. Okay, kaf alef amud bet. Rabbi Yehuda ben Metera omer. Rabbi Yehuda ben Metera says kutach vechol minei kutach. Asur limkor 30 yom kol Pesach. Kutach habavli, it's a type of like a milky dish. So this milky dish, it says over here, or any type of a dish that has like a chametz, you're not allowed to sell it to a goy 30 days before Pesach. Why? Because they don't eat it; they actually just use it as a dip. So therefore, it's going to take a long, long time. So it comes out that again, this is coming out from Shita Bet Shammai. That means our Mishnah is paskening not like Bet Shammai. And it's permitting that as long as we're doing like Bet Hillel, that as long as you're allowed to eat it, you're allowed to sell it. And no problem. He's going to have it over Pesach. No problem. Doesn't matter. Okay, very good. Next. Okay. Umutar bana. You're allowed to benefit from it. So it says the Gemara Pshita, obviously, right? Obviously, you're allowed to benefit from it from that time. So it says the Gemara Lutzicha, what are we dealing with? Shecharachok kodem zmano. That basically we're talking about that it already started getting burnt before the 6th hour. So it's coming to teach us like Rava. The Rava Bezava says, if you already started burning it beforehand, mutar bana afilu lachar zmano. So that means if you already started burning it beforehand, and it's already as if to say, batel ta'amo marito, that you don't have the ta'am, or meaning the taste or the appearance, you're allowed to benefit from it even after zmano. So that's what it means. Mutar bana is not talking about before the time, because that's pashut. We're talking about mutar bana after the time. And why is it mutar bana after the time? Because if you already burnt it before the time and it already completely got burnt, that it loses the appearance and the taste, you're allowed to benefit from it even after the time. Avar zmano, but if it passed the time, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Says the Gemara Pshita, obviously, answers the Gemara, lo tzicha, what do we deal with? L'sha'ot midrabanan. We're talking about sha'ot, which is the yisur of the achilat chametz midrabanan, which is the 6th hour. So the Mishnah is teaching us that even though, right, even during this hour, it's a sur bana'ah, means even though it's only midrabanan, okay, it's still going to be a sur bana'ah. Fine. Next. Right? The Amar Rav Gida, Amar Rav Chia, Bar Yosef, Rav Yonasan, Yochanan. It says Rav Gida, Rav Chia, Bar Yosef, and then Rav Yochanan. Hamkadesh mishesh sha'ot ulmala. If you're going to marry a woman with this chametz from the 6th hour onwards, afilu bechite kurdanyata, even with wheat of kurdanyata, which is very hard, and they're not going to become chametz so easily. En choshin lekidushin. It's not a good kiddushin. Why? Because since the Chachamim said it's a sur mana, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Right? It's a rabbinical law. Chametz is a sur mana, so you're not allowed to benefit from it. So you gave it to her as a win, was as like a kinyan to acquire her. It has to be shaveh pruta. It's not worth anything because you're not allowed to benefit from it. You're not allowed to come and use it for your ovens. So says Ibn Pshita, obviously, saying if you just said it's a sur bana, you're not allowed to use it for your oven, right? As fuel. So answers the Gemara, Lotzicha, what are we dealing with? Ela Rabbi Yehuda. This is according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda says, En biyur chametz ela srefa. Now the only way to get rid of the chametz is only going to be srefa. Okay? Okay, fine. So he says over here as follows. So he says like this. He says that you're going to come and you're going to say that it's going to be a sur, right? He says the only way to get rid of chametz is going to be b'srefa. Salka daitamina, I would have thought to say that what? I would have thought to say, right? The hoil ve'amar Rabbi Yehuda, since Rabbi Yehuda says mitzato b'srefa, the mitzvah is b'srefa. V'hadi de kasarifle litanem mine. So while he's already burning it, he could benefit from it. Kamashmana, you're not allowed to benefit from it, which means like this. We thought that since according to the Shitat Rabbi Yehuda, you have to completely burn it. So I thought, okay, fine. If you're already burning it, this is the main way of doing chametz. So you could benefit from it. Kamashmalan, you're not allowed to benefit from it at all. Amar Chizkiah, says Chizkiah. How do we know in chametz and pesach is a subana? Shneimar says in pasuk, lo yachel chametz. You're not allowed to eat chametz. What does it mean lo yachel? Lo yehe bo heter achila. You should not have any type of heter which is going to come to an achila, which means you're not allowed to have any hana'ah, which stam hana'ah brings to achila. So therefore, that's why how we know, because since it says lo yachel, it doesn't only mean you're just eating it. It says lo yachel, it shouldn't be a heter achila, which means a benefiting which brings to achila. Ta'ama, the reason why, because the Torah says ketav lo yachel chametz. Halo ketav lo yachel, but if it wasn't written lo yachel, having no word to say. Isur achila mashma, isur hana lo mashma. There's only achila and not hana'ah. That means you're not allowed to eat it, but you're allowed to benefit. Upliga de Rabbi Yavu, and this argues on Rabbi Yavu. But it says Rabbi Yavu, kol makom shenemar, anytime that it says in the Torah lo yochal, lo tochal, lo tochelu, echad isur achila ve'echad isur hana mashma. It's mashma both of them. At shifro lecha katuv, until the pasuk actually explicitly tells you, kadesh lecha benevela, just like I told you by nevela, which means by the nevela it's written, right? Lo tochelu kol nevela, you're not allowed to eat a nevela. And then it says, that you're allowed to give it to the ger, or you're allowed to sell it to a goy. So the fact that it had to tell you, why did it have to tell you that? It just told you, don't eat it, but you're allowed to benefit. So comes Rabbi Yavu and says, the fact that really, whenever it says lo tochal or lo tochlu, whatever, don't eat it means benefiting as well. So why does it, over there, you had to tell me that it's mutar bana. That's the proof. You understand? That means there it's the proof that anytime that it says lo tochelu, it means you're not allowed to eat and you're not allowed to benefit, except for when the Torah tells you you're allowed to benefit. The Tanya was learned to the right, lo tochelu kol nevela lagel shemishach hatzdim v'chalal machol lenochri, en li ela lagel benetina v'lenochri b'mechira. In the pasuk it says you're not allowed to eat any nevela, but we just said, right, you're not allowed to eat the nevela, but you're allowed to what? You're allowed to benefit. Why? Because you're allowed to give it to the ger, right? Lagel shemishach hatzitzinela, you're allowed to give it to him, v'chalal he could eat it, or machor, or you could sell it to the goy. So the Gemara is going to say, "En liela ger benetina unochri b'mechira." I only know by a ger to do with giving it to him for free as a present, and by a goy to sell it. Yeah, la ger b'mechira minayin. How do you know that you could sell it to a goy, to a ger? Sorry, because again, it said in the Torah Mefurash, the ger you give it to a present, the goy you sell it. Can I sell it to the ger? So Talmud has to teach you la ger shemishach hatzitzinena o machor. So therefore, the fact that there's a smichut, which is a proximity, right, a juxtaposition, which it brings us right close together, you're allowed to come and you're allowed also the mechira. Lenochrim benetina mina. How am I allowed to give it as a present to the goy? So the same thing the other way around. So you could see from here, whether it's a ger toshav. Here we're not talking about a ger, a Jew. Because a ger, a Jew, obviously you can't give him a nevela. Here we're talking about a ger toshav. Ger toshav means that he lives in the land of Israel. However, though, he only keeps Sheva Mitzvot ben Enoch. He doesn't keep anything else. So he's called a ger toshav, which means he's like a resident. You understand? He's a resident. He's not a Jew. He's not a ger, meaning he's not a Jew, but he's a ger toshav. So it says the Gemara, you see from here, whether we're talking about a ger or nochri, whether a mechira or netina, according to Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to sell it or give it as a present, whether to the ger toshav, or to who? Or to the goy. Right? Rabbi Yehuda says, the pasuk is exactly the way that it's written. You have to give it to the ger as a present, and you have to sell it to the goy as a sale. You're not allowed to switch. You're not allowed to give it to the goy as a present, and you're not allowed to sell it to the ger. It has to be dvarim kichtavan, exactly how it's written in the Torah, in the Bible. That's how you have to do it. Yeah. So my time Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason Rabbi Yehuda? If you're going to tell me that I mean like Rabbi Meir, lichtov rachmana, the Torah should have written la ger Hashem b'sherecha tina v'achala u'machol lenochri. Oh, lamali. Why did he have that extra word? Oh. Right? Just say u'machal lenochri. Why do you have the extra word oh? Shma mina dvarim kichtavan. Everything is exactly the way that it's written. Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, the O is lagdim netina degel mechila lenochri. The O is coming to give you what's the order of preferences. Meaning the first order of preferences. Yeah, we're almost done. The first order of preference is always you give it as a present to the ger. Order of preference number 2, sell it to the goy. But that's why the word O is giving you order of preference. Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, halot tzrikra, you don't need a pasuk to tell you the order of preference. Given the ger you have an obligation, you have a mitzvah to be mefarnes the ger toshav. Venochri, by a goy, you're not you're not obligated to revive him or to let him, right? You're not obligated to do this. So lo tzrikra, you don't need a pasuk. Svara, it's a svara. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, since it's svara, you don't need a pasuk. So the word o is extra. Why is it extra? To teach you exactly the way that it's written in the pasuk. That's what you have to do. You have to davka give it as a present to the ger, and you have to davka specifically sell it to the goy, right? However, though, according to Rabbi Meir, right, he said no, you don't say that. So bishlema Rabbi Meir, it's good according to Rabbi Meir that whether it's a ger or a nochri, whether you could give it to him as a present or sell it to him. But since you need a pasuk to teach you that it's mutar bana by nevela, hakol isur but every other isur in the Torah, asurim b'machila b'menachina, it's always going to be prohibited. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, that he says lidvarim kichtavanu data, that it's everything exactly the way that it's written in the Torah. Hakol isurim Torah menale. How do we know that by everything else it's going to be asur bana? It could be that the pasuk is only coming to be matir the nevela bana, but it's coming to prohibit the mechira leger the netina lenochri. Right? That means it's not coming to permit the anaa. It's just coming to permit the goy and the nochri. Meaning, what happened all of a sudden? We wanted to come and we wanted to say from the fact that it's written that lo tochilu always means everything. Lo tochlu means asura hanaa and achila, both eating and hanaa. Then we brought a pasuk. The pasuk says, what's a proof to my words? The pasuk says you're not allowed to eat a nevela, and then it says you're allowed to have hanaa, you're allowed to benefit. So it says the Gemara, maybe that pasuk was only teaching you that you're allowed, it's not that in general you're allowed to benefit, it's only teaching you a general rules. But here, right, that's what it says here. Lo ba latir nevela bana, ele lesor mechira leger v'netila lenochri. Meaning, really, be'emet, in a normal scenario, right? Maybe the pasuk is not coming to be matir the nevela bana. It's only coming to prohibit the mechira leger v'netila lenochri. That means we would have permitted everything, and now it's coming to say, no, it's not permitted everything. It's only permitted these things, right? Which is basically only the selling or giving it as a present. So says the Gemara, nafkale. We already learned that from the pasuk. You're going to throw it to the dog. What does that mean? The word oto, when you say lakelev tashlichun, just throw it to the dog. Why does it say lakelev tashlichun? Oto, it. The word it, oto, is superfluous. It's extra. Why? Oto atamashlich lakelev. Only the terefa you're allowed to throw to the dog. The atamashlich lakelev, but you're not allowed to throw to the dog anything which is prohibited for the Torah, because it's a sulmana. So from here we learn that since I actually learned from the dog a different halacha, the different halacha is that usually I would have said that it's always a sulbana, all types of things. And where do we learn that from? From la kelev tashlichun oto. Because the fact that it had to come and tell you the word oto, only the terefa you could throw to the kelev, but not any other type of isurim Torah. Every other type of isurim Torah, bemet would be asur. So therefore, bemet, all the isurim Torah is a sulbana, right? It's only this one which is a little bit different. Okay. Be'ezrat Hashem, we continue on Sunday. So we finish Shabbat stuff, okay?